You all know about Castlegar, the new island in the War Within, and that we're getting the 4 zones. Well, Blizzard recently stated that there is another map they're keeping hidden and they don't want to test it in the beta due to big lore implications. Based on the most recent datamine maps and strings, Hellowfall is ranked as Zone 3, while the lowest most zone, Ashka Hecht, is ranked as Zone 5, putting a place called Rootlands as Zone 4 that is nowhere to be seen in the game. Saying that the Haronir are the guardians of these routes and they got significant cinematic time, despite the fact that they're barely present in the beta, it must mean there is still a lot more we're going to see once the expansion is out. We're looking at Titan lore, a Fallen World 3, Old God Blood, and who knows what else. So what exactly is this hidden zone? If you want to get Dragonflight or anything else Warcraft related, Gamivo has some excellent deals that you can check out with my link below. Best of all, you can get software, gift cards, a bunch of games at below market prices. On top of that, you can also use my code DORON to get yet another discount, so make sure to check out my link below and grab some amazing deals at Gamivo. Castlegar, also known as Sector AR-938, is much more than just a simple island. For some reason, this island was a mystery for the longest time, despite the fact that it is right off the shore of Pandaria, but the island itself is actually quite tiny, nothing of any real significance, but the real content comes from below, and so far this is the only zone on Azeroth that is almost entirely under the ground. Now, the beta is almost wrapping up, we're going to get the expansion in just a few weeks, and despite the fact that we have seen almost everything in the War Within, Blizzard purposefully didn't put a few things into the alpha and the beta. Most notably, they only showed what happened to Dalaran, but they removed anything that would give context, and most interestingly, they had hidden an entire zone, which is actually really strange, seeing that this zone is not at the lowest most layer as we had previously thought, but actually above Ashka Hecht, the Nerubian Kingdom. So the hidden zone is between Hellfall and Ashka Hecht. If you've seen the newest official cinematic, you might have noticed that the Haronir got an oddly suspicious amount of screen time, seeing that they're barely present within the actual game and the questlines. We got the main character, Orvenia, a few of them, but nothing that groundbreaking, and so far they don't seem to be on the scale of the Earthen or the Nerubians or the Arati, yet they seem to be equal when it comes to the main races of this expansion and this storyline. The reason for that is because they actually are as present, it's just that we're not going to see it yet. Based on a few recently datamine maps and strings, we realized that there are in fact 5 zones of this new continent island, and the 4th one was actually removed from 11.0. It was originally supposed to be a part of the main patch, but it looks like they moved this content either for 11.0.5 or 11.1. Additionally, in an interview, Blizzard stated that there is in fact another zone that they're hiding because it would spoil a significant part of the storyline, and they don't want to add it into the beta, and at this point we're like 99% certain to what is going on. In fact, if you've been following the hidden lore and the minor updates, you almost certainly know what I'm talking about. So the map that was datamined ranks the zones in a specific order. Keep in mind, they seem to be using internal names like the ones they're working with, not the official ones, the ones we're going to see. It goes Zone 1 Earthen Isle, Zone 2 Earthen Works, Zone 3 Erator Canyons, Zone 4 Rootlands, and Zone 5 Nerubian. So essentially it goes Isle of Dorn, Ringen Deep, Hellowfall, Rootlands, and Ashka Hecht. These Rootlands are the hidden zone, and as I said, we almost all know what this is about. The remains of the original World 3 of Azeroth, Heirloom, are here. They originally hinted at this around the end of Dragonflight. We learned that the mother to old World 3 was originally planted somewhere on Azeroth. It was ripped out, and this was like a sundering type catastrophe in ancient Azeroth history that the Titans kind of wanted to write out of the book, so they never ever talk about this, like they never even mentioned this tree existed. Essentially, during the Titan cleansing of the Black Empire when they attacked, Elune and the Titan Eonar shared a special bond that we knew nothing about and worked together to help cleanse the old god corruption. So they figured they would plant a World 3 that would see it live, that would help the planet heal. The lead Titan guy Amantul came in, hated this idea, and then just ripped it out. Eonar cried tears that formed into a lake that ultimately made the roots strong, and eventually unknown guardians came in order to contain these roots. Additionally, I want to mention another thing here, as this is actually a massive hint for what is happening, especially for the World Soul Saga when combined with the new Chronicle lore. So in the Chronicle Volume 4 book that was just released, we learned that Azeroth is a neutral essence of power and that it can be converted into a Titan, but it isn't necessarily a Titan. This kind of confirms that the Titans are trying to force awaken Azeroth as one of their own. Seeing that the other Titans were born in this way, it would indicate that Aman'Dul might have created his brothers and sisters against their will, and that they aren't exactly a Titan pantheon hive mind, but instead all these guys might be following one master, which in this case would be Aman'Dul. You can see that he kinda scolded Eonar, he ripped out her project and destroyed it, so it doesn't seem like these guys are exactly harmonious equals, but something bigger might be going on behind the scenes. But back to the topic at hand, I know we're talking about speculations here, but let's just say that this entire Khazlagar Lunahir thing is really as good as confirmed. I mean, Khazlagar is obviously strongly connected to the World Soul. It is an important spot on Azeroth. There is a sea under the sea, a giant lake, so very likely the Tears of Eonar. We got this mysterious Night Elven Dark Troll race that is right around the roots. They're wearing this root armor that is significantly developed, very likely as a future allied race, so these unknown guardians are almost certainly the Haronir. There are literally roots around them in the new official cinematic that was just released, and this zone in the Eternal Maps is called Root Lands. I really don't think at this point this is a speculation, especially as the Earthen were originally sent to Khazlagar to seal a hole in the ground, which obviously would be there after a gigantic world tree was ripped out. What is really interesting though is that the Nerubian Kingdom is actually below the roots of Lunahir, which means Eonar and Elune planted this right on top of them, which isn't exactly a genius thing when you really think about it. As you can see, they're harvesting Old God blood here, which could indicate that there was a fifth Old God present here, which could also be the reason why they planted it here in the first place. Remember the lore that we know. The Titans first ripped out Y'Shaarj, they realized they screwed up. You can't really just brute force the old gods. Then they created prisons, but pretty much every single prison over time proved ineffective. They also kind of created G'huun by trying to experiment on them. Now in Dragonflight, a recent document stated that they didn't exactly contain the old gods as they wanted all of us to believe, so it is entirely possible that planting a world tree on top of old gods might have been a project that backfired immediately, hence they ripped it out. Additionally, Elune seems to have been involved in this as a being of life, and seeing that the Titans wanted to convert Azeroth into one of their own, they probably didn't want help from outside cosmological forces. However, based on this lore and the Haronir and the fact that Old God of Blood is everywhere all over Khazlagar and all this void presence, I don't think the Rootlands are going to just be about the Lunahir and a world tree. That would not really be all that interesting. I think there is going to be the background story. We're going to be discovering the remains of this mother world tree that existed in ancient history. However, the big thing is probably going to be the fifth Old God and how this entire giant mess was created. The mural in Ash'Khet is so obviously hinting at something Old God related with this mysterious figure. The recent Chronicle book doubled down on the fact that a fifth Old God exists. I think this is the main reason that they're keeping the zone Rootlands hidden. I don't think learning about the Lunahir is really that big of a spoiler that Blizzard would withhold the entire zone from testing. I think this zone will ultimately reveal the true plan of Xal'atath and why exactly she came to this place to complete the awakening, and literally just not any other place on Azeroth. I think we're going to learn about the secret Old God and what happened in ancient history of Azeroth, and I also think this could definitely lead to the final boss of the War Within, which might just be this fifth Old God, so naturally they wouldn't let us in on this info before the expansion was even released. Thanks for watching. Check out the new pictures that reveal the crystal and what it actually is in Hellfall by clicking on the screen, and check out my video on ancient training methods by clicking on the screen as well. See you next time.